Behind me is the field of Agincourt, where in the 15th century AD, King Henry V defeated Constable of France in a decisive battle. Hi, I'm Matthew Settle, and this is Decisive Battles. In 1415 AD, in this field here, is where two armies fought. A bloody battle in the 100 Years' War, and the outcome was a change in history.
It started off as a simple land dispute between the English and the French. This soon turned into a war that lasted, by my best calculations, about 100 years or so, give or take. It was known as the 100 Years' War.
78 years into the 100 Years' War, the English King Henry V of England was leading an English army of 5,000 English knights and archers through the French countryside on his way to Calais to resupply and rearm his army to continue his campaign in the French countryside. But as he continued through, he was constantly followed by a French army.
It was mostly fought as a simple invade and destroy the countryside, then pull back into the coast.
This French army consisted of 10,000 French knights and noblemen. They would meet the English outside the French city of Agincourt.
So it was mostly fought in the French countryside, in Aquitaine and Normandy. There was very few major battles ever fought between the French and the English, and these were mostly small battles. So this rivalry was a lot like the rivalry between us at Yale and the vagabonds over at Harvard University. We usually had several spelling bees and archery competitions that us Yale men won. It was quite good.
The French constable Charles Albert would finally catch up to the English army outside the city of Agincourt on the just newly plowed field near the city. On the day of, after a heavy rain through the night, the French army began to mobilize and suit up for the battle ahead. As the English quickly advanced forward into their view, they knew that this battle would be based upon their superior numbers and overwhelming force compared to the English, and the English army was heavily outnumbered. As the French moved forward to match the advancing English, they would soon be coming in the range of the English archers. These English longbowmen were the main force behind the English army and consisted heavily upon them and would rely upon their skill in battle.
So these archers of the English army, they would usually have to shoot at about a 30 to 40 degree angle in order to reach the French aggressors coming at them. They used usually about a 3 to 4 foot longbow. This was the typical weapon used by the Welsh archers that were in the English division for archery. This was a lot like what we used at the Yale archery team. You know, I was the captain, and I would usually spend about 2 to 4 hours a day practicing my archery. It was pretty cool.
With these stakes deployed to prevent the French cavalry from attacking them, the French now lost their advantage over cavalry and had to advance forward into the range of the English archers and would soon come under a hail of arrows coming from these highly skilled archers hidden in the woods and on the flanks of the English army. King Henry V knew that due to his dire situation, he needed to win the battle and continue on to get to the coast, or his army would be destroyed and the English would lose the war.
He was suffering immensely from sickness and disease. They were stuck in the French countryside after they had just successfully taken one of the French cities, and they desperately wanted to get to the coast to resupply and reinforce their army. So when the English caught up to the French, who were stationed in a small village, they set up camp outside the French army, but the French were waiting for sickness, disease, and hunger to set in before they would attack. So this was a lot like at Yale when I was the captain of the polo team, and one of our Yale men went over and put a little something in the horses for the Harvard team, and that caused the Harvard to play quite a poor match the next day. It was quite good.
The English army had to defeat the French here at this battle, but it would be hard due to the overwhelming number of French soldiers deployed outside of the English army waiting for battle.
So the French had 3 lines of infantry. There was one here, and one here. So this is the French cavalry right here. The English, they're way over here, And consisting of the English army were the archers, and they set up spikes in order to stop the advance of the French cavalry. So the French battle strategy was to have these 3 lines, like here, these 3 lines to come at them in 3 separate waves at the English army. And this was an alright battle plan because the French actually outnumbered the English 4-1.
With the order given to advance, the first wave moved forward through the mud, discovering that it was harder to travel through mud than anticipated, so their quick advance turned into a slow walk for the French army.
When the French general advanced his first line of infantry, the men struggled through the mud. It had rained the night before. This was not as easy as wading through water. This was tough stuff. So the English had archers stationed, in the flanks, everywhere. They were firing arrows just left and right at the French line of infantry.
As the struggling French moved forward, arrows from the hidden archers in the woods and on the flanks of the English army began to open fire their arrows upon the advancing French. Hundreds of French were struck down by these arrows advancing through the mud, as they struggled to the English lines, hoping that they would get there before the English archers got a chance to kill them. The English archers were highly skilled at raining down arrows upon the advancing French, moving through the mud, heading towards the English lines.
So when the English started firing arrows at the French, the English had their flanks, they were firing arrows left and right at these guys. So the French had a very difficult time getting through this field. But when they finally advanced to the English line, it was just hand-to-hand fight, just stabbing like this, and men were coming like that. These men were a different breed.
Hoping that their overwhelming numbers would overwhelm the English army, French knights charged towards the center lines of the English army, hoping that their overwhelming numbers would break through the English men-at-arms and knights centered at the center of the English army. As they charged forward under the hail of arrows, they collided with the English center, and soon a great melee opened up between the French and English. But some of the French had forgotten of the spikes deployed on the flanks and ran headlong into those spikes, and hundreds more were killed by those, and by the archers, hidden in the woods on the flanks of the English lines, raining down arrows upon their sides. Both sides seemed evenly matched in a deadlock, as both sides fought to gain the upper advantage over their counterparts in front of them. French knights were undertrained conscripts, while the English had been fighting for a while. By this time, most knights under the French army had dismounted, and those who weren't were easy targets for the well-trained English army.
So in these battles, these guys are face to face. You're looking at this guy. He is, eye contact with this guy. He could have kids, grandkids, a wife, family, and you have to cut this guy's head off, or else he's going to cut your head off. This is a split-second decision. You've got people, with spears flipping you upside down and stabbing you. These guys were a different breed. This was just intense fighting. The field was honestly turning red with blood. It was just total anarchy.
To help their struggling friends fighting the English, the second wave of French infantry advanced forward, hoping that now their overwhelming numbers would consume the English lines and the French would have victory. As they collided at the center of the English army, the fighting became even more intense as both sides tried to fight for the upper hand over one another. As the French nobles began losing men faster than the English did, the third wave, not knowing whether to advance forward or run away, began running into battle, hoping that these numbers would now turn the tide of battle towards a French victory, as they also struggled through the mud towards the English lines. Even with these new numbers, the day was looking more as an English victory than a French one. Even though the individual French soldier fought as hard as he could, they were too exhausted from running through the mud, watching their friends die in front of them, and fighting for 4 hours on end. As the English began to gain the upper hand over the French army, they were killing off as many French as they could before the French would run away. By this time, the French's superior numbers had dwindled down to dead even.
So each one of these French waves, I mean, they had 3 of these massive waves, was a complete failure. There were approximately 10,000 French casualties.
With the 10,000 French casualties and only 2,000 English casualties, the French knew that they had lost the battle and began to run away, while under a heavy barrage of arrows coming from the remaining archers hidden on the flanks and in the woods who had not fought in the battle, while only a few French noblemen and knights continued to fight a lost battle. As the rest of the French ran away, the English began to count their losses, knowing that they just beaten the French army that outnumbered them almost 4 to 1. Remaining French soldiers who refused to give up continued to fight a lost battle. Finally, at the end of it, the remaining knights and noblemen of the French army realized the battle was lost, and they too began to run away or were taken prisoner by the English army. The English had won a decisive battle against the French army.
So most of these Frenchmen were nobles, and they were taken prisoner and were either sold back to the French for money, or they were tortured with such devices as the Spanish donkey or the shepherd's dog.